Hey folks, John here, Old Hickory Forge. Welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome. So, what's going on today? I'm out here in the workshop. We're still playing catch up on the Patreon giveaways. If you're new to the channel and you don't know, I'm supposed to do Patreon giveaways once every 3 months for those who support me on Patreon. And as of the time of this recording, I'm 3 months behind, so this is technically December of 2022's giveaway. But anyway, let's get started on the project. What I want to do for this project is that I want to make a kitchen knife, but I want to make it out of what's called fossil Damascus. And if you don't know what that is, anytime you make Damascus or pattern welded steel, whichever you want to call it, the correct answer varies depending on who you're talking to. But every time you go in for your cut and fold or your cut and restack or what have you, you often cut the ends off of your billet to make sure you've got good flush welding surfaces going forward. And what you can do is you can save those end cuts. I've got a bunch of them here in this little can right here. And what you can do is you can clean those up and pack them into a canister with powdered steel and make a canister Damascus, and what you get is a pattern called fossil Damascus. And what's really, really cool about it is every single piece of it is really, really one of a kind, because there's all manner of different layer counts and patterns and all kinds of crap in here. So every fossil Damascus blade is truly, truly unique. So that's what we're going to be doing. If you want to check it out, stick around. If you've been around the channel and you've seen me do canister welds before, you know that I like to use stainless steel tubing. The reason for that is that it won't forge weld to the contents of the can, so it's super, super easy to extract. And I was really hoping to use these really awesome squaring dies my good buddy Joseph Garrard at Garrard Forge and Tool made for me, but the only stainless steel tubing I have on hand is just a bit too small for the big squaring dies and just a bit too big for the small ones. And we could run it through these, but I'm not confident that we would get enough compaction to have a good forge weld, so we're going to go with our usual method of upset, square up, upset, square up. The only difference is instead of using white out or stainless steel foil, what have you, I'm using white spray paint. From what I understand, titanium dioxide is the compound that prevents the contents of the can from sticking to the can, and it's a white pigment used in spray paints and white out and so forth. So I've got some 3-inch square tubing. It's the only square tubing I had on hand, so we're going to be making a pretty big billet. But we got the inside coated with our white spray paint, we got the lid coated with our white spray paint. We'll get all the pieces for our fossil Damascus cleaned up, cut up, pack that guy full of powdered steel, weld this guy on, and hopefully make a big piece. So it looks like we got enough, but one thing I've learned doing fossil Damascus is you want to cut up your pieces pretty small, so we're going to cut these into quarters or, as small a pieces as we reasonably can. Reason for that is once it's pressed out into a bar, the pattern's going to spread out quite a bit. And between all these big pieces, there's lots of room for the powdered steel, and once it's pressed out, you can end up with kind of big swaths of really nothing going on in your pattern. So let's cut these guys up. We're pretty close to the top. That doesn't look too bad. So now I'm going to go ahead and just fill this guy full of powdered steel. Tap the canister with a hammer to vibrate it to the bottom, Nothing to it, really. Alrighty, we got our canister sealed up tight, so we'll go ahead and get this guy in the forge and bring it up to welding heat nice and slow. Biggest thing with canister is not to rush the soak, so we're going to soak it probably about 15 minutes at welding heat to make sure the billet's hot all the way through. And then we'll go to the press and see what we can do. Everything's looking pretty good. The forge is up to welding heat. We brought the canister up nice and slow, so now I'm going to start the soak. I'm going to give it, I think, 20 minutes total. We're going to sit it on one side for 10 minutes, turn it over, give it 10 more minutes. And then we'll go to the press, square it up, upset. The first few presses on a canister are always so scary because it compacts so much so fast. But hopefully we'll get a nice billet out of this. All right, here we go, boys. That first pass felt really good. It feels solid on the inside, and the can's already starting to come off, so that spray paint really works. I'm going to do at least one more, maybe two, depending on kind of how it looks. The good thing about doing a canister this big is you have lots of time to work with it before it cools off, so that's kind of neat. But anyway, let's keep moving. Here we go. Alright, I'm going to stop here because that can is just begging to come off of there. That white spray paint works really good. It looks like, we'll see how difficult of a time we have actually peeling the can, but Looks pretty good on the inside, so fingers crossed we got some good steel in there, boys. So the can came off pretty easily, you know, not quite as easily as stainless tubing, but much easier than whiteout, so I definitely might use that white spray paint again in the future. But we got a real nice looking billet, a few little odds and ends to trim off, as well as we want to grind out where the seam of the tubing was before we go to forge this out, so we're not making cold shuts. You never really know with canister until you try to forge it, so hopefully it holds up. So, we got this guy drawn out into a 3/4 inch thick by 1.5 inch wide bar stock, and if we're careful, we might be able to get 1 or 2 kitchen knives out of this. That's obviously a joke. There's way more here than I need. Realistically, you could pull a sword out of this if you wanted to, and this might be the way that I do canister going forward, because having a big billet, it's much easier to set the forge weld. You're not so worried about it cooling off quickly, and it's also nice that after you take what you need, you have more of it that you can use for other projects. The white spray paint worked like a charm, so that's pretty sweet. And but anyway, we'll let this guy cool. We'll take what we need and get started. These integrals are always kind of a pain starting out because there's no good way to hold on to them. But now that we have the bolster material set down, we got a good, relatively square place to hold it with our tongs, and we'll start forging out some blades. Alright, so off the anvil we got 2 real nice looking blades, so the next thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and strike in a rough profile. We don't got to have anything perfect yet. Then I'll go ahead and flatten the bolsters and stamp my touch mark. I'm not going to worry about squaring up the shoulders until after heat treating. So we'll profile, flatten the bolster, stamp the mark, and then we'll go to the quench with these bad boys. Alright, here we go. This is Damascus, so we're going into Parks 50. I'm just being careful to stay away from the bolster and tang area so we can file it to square it later. Once we got about 10 solid seconds in the oil, I'll pull this guy out, bring it over here to my vise with some lane wire, and hopefully straighten out any warping that might happen during quenching. Alrighty, we're out of the temper. Next step is to go ahead and get the bolster area filed square and flat and everything. So I got the file guide posted up. We'll get as close as we can with the sander, being careful not to damage the carbides. And then we'll go in here with, you know, all our trusty files and make it as flat as we can. I've already done this one, so something along these lines is kind of what we're going for. So I've gone ahead and roughed in the grinds. We still got quite a bit of thickness to grind out of these things, but I took the Rockwell files to them just to see if they needed another temper cycle, and they're both still skating the 65 Rockwell quite easily, so they're way too hard. So we're going to do 2 more hours at 400 to hopefully bring them down to a, you know, a serviceable level of hardness so they won't be so brittle. Also, this one had a little bit of a warp, so we got it clamped straight. Hopefully another temper cycle with it being clamped straight will fix that, and we'll keep moving. After 2 more hours at 400 degrees, we are still skating the 60 file, but the 65 is biting reasonably well across the entirety of both blades. So We're probably somewhere around like 62, 64 Rockwell, which is a little bit on the hard side, but for a kitchen knife, if you ask me, that's not a bad thing. So anyway, we'll keep grinding on these bad boys. I'm finally getting another chance to work on these things. I've gone ahead and trimmed the tangs up a little bit down to their final length and rounded up the bolsters a tiny bit. Next thing we got to do is come in here and clean up this transition from the bolster to the blade. So we got our trusty small wheel attachment on the grinder. Then after that, we'll put the S-grind in. Nothing to it, really. So I've decided to change up my order of march a little bit. I've gone ahead and taken the bolsters up through the grits with the 120 and the Trizac belt. So those are ready for hand sanding. The edges are still a little bit thicker than I want them. This is one of the bigger challenges that people, myself included, have with kitchen knives, is making them thin enough, because, you know, a proper chef's knife is crazy thin. Like, these are down at the cutting edge to between 7 and 10 thousandths of an inch, and I actually asked on Instagram, you know, what do you high-end chef's knife makers, what do you take your primary bevel to before you sharpen? And I got answers between like 1 and 3 thousandths of an inch and as close to 0 as possible. So by the time I'm actually done with the primary grind on these things, they're going to be almost sharp. So even as thin as they are, they're still too thick, so we're just going to keep hogging off material before we put in the S-grind. So now it's time to put in the S-grinds on these knives, and what that is just a wide, shallow fuller on either side of the blade. When I first asked about S-grinds, I got lots of different answers. You know, like, you ask 10 people, you're going to get 12 different answers. So like I've often done, I've just jumped off the roof and more or less built my parachute on the way down. I figured I'd just go for it, buy the 14-inch contact wheel and see if it works. Well, it kind of does, but it's not quite wide enough to be an actual S-grind. You know, it's better than not having one. But either way, you can see the difference in the radius between the radius platen and the 14-inch contact wheel. So I'm here to tell you, if you want to do S-grinds, just go ahead and buy the radius platen. Don't spend 300 bucks on a contact wheel you're going to use once. I mean, it's still good for other stuff, so I'm going to keep it around, but had I known what I know now, I wouldn't have bought this wheel. Also, if you're wondering why my grinder looks all wonky, it's because this is actually a Gen 5 platen that Brian Housewort was kind enough to send to me, so I could attach this radius platen to it. And my grinder's a Gen 3 and the measurements are kind of different, but it'll do the job. So I've never actually done a real S-grind before. Last time, like I said, I used the contact wheel, which is a little different. So I've got a pretty dull belt on here. I've got the grinder slowed down, and I'm just going to try to get my bearings before I really lay into this blade, because I don't want to grind through it or anything like that. But here we go. So, I'm not entirely sure if I did this right or not. You know, you kitchen knife makers sound off in the comments, but from what I understand, an S-grind is a wide, shallow fuller that's supposed to take up basically the entire blade and stop short of the cutting edge, so you still have a flat right behind your cutting edge. And I'm going to quit chasing my tail on the grinder and just accept that I'm going to be hand sanding this thing forever, because at this point I'm worried about making it worse. But anyway, it's nice and thin, nice and light, so we're getting somewhere. I wanted to show you something pretty cool. This knife has not been sharpened yet. This is just how thin the edge is. How stinking cool is that? So the edge is all the way down to 0, and you could leave it like that and do what's called a 0 grind, but it actually makes the edge very, very weak. So after the edge, we are going to be putting a secondary bevel on this. But how cool is that? Once this thing is done, it's going to be a real freaking razor blade. Alrighty, so the blades have been hand sanded up to 600 grit, the handles are done, finished out all that, and now we're ready for the acid bath to go ahead and bring out the pattern and the steel. And the reason I made 2 of these is, that I want to do a side-by-side comparison between our tried and true ferric chloride and this stuff right here. It's called Gator Piss Pre-Mixed Etchant for knife makers and metal workers. This stuff is made and sold by the folks over at Baker Forge and Tool who do amazing work. I'll drop a link to their IG in the description box below as well as the pinned comment. If you're in the market for exotic steels like copper QMI or bronze mine or something like that, they're the best in the business. Now, they didn't send me this. I paid full price for this, so if you're going to get in the comments calling me a shill, get lost. But anyway, we're going to do our usual ferric chloride, routine and everything, degrease, etch, neutralize, oil, sand, and whatnot. And then we're going to follow the instructions on the back of this guy as closely as we can, and we'll see which one gives us a better result. So if you didn't know, this is usually what a blade looks like when you pull it out of ferric chloride. What you have to do next is neutralize the acid with either Windex or baking soda or something like that, and then you oil it with some WD-40 and you polish it with 2000 grit to bring out the pattern. After your first etching cycle, the pattern's always usually kind of muddy like this. So to get better contrast, we'll go through that whole process at least one more time, and then maybe one more depending on kind of how we want it to look. But this is where you really get your first look at the pattern. Pretty stinking cool. This is our third etching cycle. This is usually what I do, so I'm going to stop here. After your last one, it's a good idea to go ahead and neutralize the acid, oil it to keep it from rusting, and then let it sit for about 15-20 minutes to let the oxides kind of harden up, and you'll get better contrast when you polish it that way. I ran into the unexpected issue of the pitcher I bought for this project not being tall enough, so I'm sacrificing my good casserole dish for you guys. You're welcome. So the process with the Gator Piss doesn't appear to be too much different than the ferric chloride. It just calls for a full 20 minutes each etching cycle and so on. So we got this guy in there. We'll give it 20 minutes. Pretty cool. You can already see the pattern coming out, but we'll give it 20 minutes. Then we'll pull it out, neutralize the acid, degrease it, and go through again at least 2 times to kind of get an idea of what we're dealing with. And we'll go from there. So, this is after 20 minutes in the Gator Piss. As you can see, we don't have that thick black oxide layer that you would with your ferric chloride. So we don't need to do any sanding before the next cycle. We just need to neutralize this, oil it, degrease it, wipe it off, and go back in the acid. So, this here is our blade that was etched in the ferric chloride for 3 10-minute cycles, and then I let the oxide set for 20 minutes before the final polish. The darks are popping really nice. The brights are nice and bright. You can coffee etch as well to make the darks darker, which is something that I've never really bothered with. So if there's somebody out there who wants to do the Gator Piss versus a coffee etch, I would totally watch that. But I've never really gotten results with my ferric that I was terribly unhappy with. So this here is about as good as you can realistically expect to get with just ferric. So this here is after 2 cycles in the Gator Piss, 20 minutes each, no hand polishing or anything like that. And you can see the contrast is much, much more bold. The instructions say to let it sit for 6 hours after your last etching cycle to let the oxide set and everything. I actually left it overnight because by the time I got done messing with this thing, it was like 7 o'clock and I wasn't about to come out here at 1 a.m. and mess with this thing. But anyway, what do you guys think? I'm really not sure which one I like better, the Gator Piss versus the ferric, so let me know what you think in the comments. But anyway, next step, we'll get the handles glued up, we'll get these guys sharpened, and we'll have some knives. So my first handle cracked as I was putting it on, so we started over, got a nice block of black ironwood, we'll shape out a new handle, redo the etch because from handling the blade, it's all messed up now, and hopefully have a knife before too long. So, here they're all done. I'm not entirely sure which one I like better. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. So what do you guys think? Old school ferric chloride or the new kid in town, the Gator Piss? I'm not entirely sure which one I like better. The bold contrast of the Gator Piss is nice, but the more subtle contrast of the ferric chloride is also nice. But anyway, the patterns on the blades came out awesome. I do love fossil Damascus. There's just so much going on with the blade. The more you look at it, the more you see. And it really does make a truly unique, one-of-a-kind pattern. But anyway, this is actually supposed to be the Patreon giveaway for December of last year. I'm still running behind. We're working on catching up. It's just always something. But anyway, let's pick us a winner. So for the Patreon giveaway, we're going to be using the knife with the ironwood that we etched in the Gator Piss. So let's go ahead and pick us a winner. I got my trusty wheelandnames.com pulled up. Patrons, all your names are on here. Let's click to spin. Come on, spin. There we go. Curtis Jagger. So, Curtis, if you want the knife, she's yours. I'll leave my email in the description box below as well as the pinned comment. If you just want to shoot me an email with your shipping info, I'll get this guy sent out to you. Now, I'm sure as you're wondering, John, you made 2 of those. What are you going to do with the other one? So, as for our other blade, you know, the one with the ebony handle that we etched in the old school ferric chloride, we're going to be raffling this guy off. Now, full disclosure, this is not a charity build like I like to do. This is a for-profit endeavor. We need to pay for this year's Blade Show production run, get geared up for that show and everything. Hopefully we can make enough product to sell at the show to get us out of the hole that the Great Blade Show blunder of last year left us in. If you're new to the channel and you don't know what happened, basically I made my whole Blade Show production run, something like 150 hammers, only to find out that I'd been sent several shipments of bad steel and none of them were hardenable. Some people did buy them as soft face hammers, so some of them did end up leading useful, productive lives, but the majority of them either had to be given away or just thrown out. So, and that put us, you know, quite a few $1,000s in the hole, and we're still trying to get the business back to even keel. I would like to do more charity work, but keeping the business afloat is a bit more pressing of a need right now. But anyway, same way I always do my raffles. Today's March 22nd. We'll run this until April 20th. That's when we'll pick the winner. So that should give lots of people plenty of time to see the video and get in on it. Slots are $10. You can buy as many as you want. Link to my PayPal down below. Patrons of the channel, you do get 1 free entry, so all your names are already on the list. But that's all I got for you. If you like what you saw, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Always more cool stuff coming. Thanks for watching, and y'all take care.